Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm going to be shedding light on what causes wage slavery. So what has precipitated wage slavery? What is the catalyst that drives wage slavery? What has brought wage slavery to fruition? What has elicited wage slavery? Well, much to my dismay, much to my consternation, much to my agony, much to my grief, much to my distress, against their own volition, against their own free will, against their own accord, under duress, children are corralled, they're thrusted into, they're dispatched to the 13-year K-12 insalubrious compulsory indoctrination camp, which some people refer to as a 13-year prison, while other people refer to as a 13-year concentration camp. Irrespective of what you call it, is an involuntary, inhumane institution that should never exist. The mandate to attend the 13-year insalubrious K-12 compulsory indoctrination camp should be abolished immediately. It's inhumane, unjust, immoral, and of course unvindicated, as well as unwarranted in every facet. People should be pioneers of their own future, as they should be able to have purview and jurisdiction over how their sacrosanct, indispensable, non-replenishable, finite, invaluable, precious time is earmarked and allocated in the simulated reality. It also doesn't help that we live in a controlled market economy with over 13,000 evisceration fees, in which people work real private sector jobs based on voluntary demand, pay into, and do not receive anything for paying into. They're just subsidizing the amenities, pensions, benefits, and lofty salaries of glorified public welfare aristocrats at the expense of their own time, wealth, happiness, and dignity. But it is what it is. So, as you guys are unequivocally aware, the causes of wage slavery are multitudinous, but I will explicate what is the first cause of wage slavery, because if this early life slavery didn't exist, if this 13-year early life slavery was more or less an anachronism of the past, then we would have a much higher likelihood of having prosperous, abundant, auspicious futures as young adults. So, as you guys are unequivocally aware, under duress, against their own volition, children are thrusted into the 13-year insalubrious K-12 compulsory indoctrination camps, and this causes them to be bereft of at least 37,440 hours of their sacrosanct, indispensable, non-replenishable, finite, and valuable precious time. Furthermore, the ramifications, repercussions of attending the 13-year insalubrious K-12 compulsory indoctrination camp are detrimental to the child's future. It causes them to succumb to chronic burnout, chronic fatigue, chronic stress, depression, agony, distress, telomere shortening, accelerated cellular aging, and it also causes them to succumb to stunted growth physically, mentally, and spiritually. Furthermore, it causes them to be preordained to experience a life fraught with extreme poverty, destitution, indigence, as well as wage slavery, unfortunately. This is under the axiom that the child is not a trust fund baby, and does not have any income generating assets that they inherited from their parents. But most people presumably do not, unfortunately, although that would help out substantially. Now, this loss of 37,440 hours is detrimental to the individual's future, and is often underestimated, is grossly underestimated how detrimental it is to the individual's future. It creates an inextricable predicament in which they're entrapped in wage slavery, sometimes in perpetuity for the entirety of their life. If they were to have purview over how their sacrosanct, indispensable, non-replenishable, finite, precious time was earmarked amid their childhood years, and they could have allocated it into cultivating lucrative brands and creating a copious amount of income generating assets. And as you guys are unequivocally aware, of course you're not guaranteed a penny on the front end or the back end, irrespective of how many income generating assets you bring to fruition. But they can help you defray the cost of living. They can help to offset your recurring expenses. And the only way to pull yourself out of the muck and mire and escape this calamitous morass of living a life fraught with wage slavery is to have your income generating assets generate enough income as an aggregate to offset your recurring expenses. That way you can at least be partially liberated. What are income generating assets? Well, they allow you to generate income potentially 24/7. They have the latent potential to draw forth income potentially 24/7. You never want to sell your sacrosanct, indispensable, non-replenishable, finite time for a pittance of fiat currency, especially at a non-subsistence wage. Income generating assets that people bring to fruition encompass podcasts, videos, blogs, online courses, ebooks, audiobooks, articles, mobile applications, mobile games, songs, as well as music videos. And of course, as you guys are unequivocally aware, you could compound your wealth by procuring income generating assets that you buy, such as stocks that bear high dividend yields, as well as rental properties, bonds, index funds, mutual funds, and annuities. So there's an exorbitant amount of ways to grow your wealth so that you can attain an abundant, prosperous, auspicious future, replete with happiness, abundance, and prosperity. So, when you graduate from the 13-year insular-based K-12 compulsory indoctrination camp, you have a worthless diploma that has no intrinsic value nor extrinsic value, is devoid of any form of value. It has no resale value. You cannot resell it on the second-hand market for anything. It's utterly worthless. So your efforts were an exercise of sheer and utter unalloyed vanity. They were nugatory, unavailing, fruitless, and worthless, to say the least, and they were unequivocally unwarranted. But it's not your fault, because you had no purview over how your sacrosanct, indispensable, non-replenishable, finite time was allocated. But if you did, then you wouldn't be in this calamitous predicament as an adult, in which you work at dead end, meaningless, dispiriting, harrowing, agonizing, unfulfilling, wretched, brutally debilitating, dead-end minimum wage job for a pittance of a non-subsistence wage that doesn't even provide you with enough purchasing power to be able to afford to finance the utmost lowest level needs relegated to the lowest tier on Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid. In other words, if you work a full-time dead-end minimum wage job, you cannot even afford to rent a one-bedroom apartment anywhere. It's quite a shame and quite a pity, but it is what it is. Your degrees, your diplomas, they're devoid of an iota of merit. They do not even have an infinitesimal amount of merit. An employer only cares if you have 3 to 5 years of work experience working the particular job they're hiring for. So if you are unqualified in that regard, then you are barred from attaining an interview, and it's completely arbitrary in terms of whoever they interview and whether or not you'll receive an interview request, because you can be the utmost qualified, most experienced, most credentialed, most competent candidate, and you're not guaranteed even a job interview. And if you are, they may deem your personality to be off-putting, and it may deter them from hiring you, in spite of the fact that you may be by far the utmost competent, most diligent, most credentialed candidate. But that's a topic for another video. So, wage slavery is induced by succumbing to 13-year early life slavery that causes you to stagnate for 13 years and causes you to be artificially set back by at least 13 years. And it's ineffably cumbersome and ineffably arduous to be able to pull yourself out of the muck and mire and escape this inextricable predicament of living a life fraught with wage slavery as a young adult, because we live in a control market economy. There's no semblance of a safety net, and for your 37,440 hours of hard work and efforts, you are uncompensated. You receive no remuneration, no pension, no benefits, no grant, no stipend, no universal basic income, absolutely nothing. But what you did receive was accelerated cellular aging, as well as stunted growth, physically, mentally, and spiritually, because you would have had an additional 37,440 hours to earmark into sleeping, exercising, eating nutrient-dense, antioxidant-rich, alkaline, healthy, raw fruitarian foods. If you had purview over your sacrosanct time amid your childhood years. Another cause of wage slavery is employers' reluctance to pay you a livable wage or even a subsistence wage. So you have no room to maneuver. You cannot buy any income-generating assets when you work for an employer, because you're not receiving enough remuneration to afford to buy stocks that can furnish you with dividends, nor bonds that can furnish you with coupon payments. You cannot afford index funds, mutual funds. They do not pay anything close to a livable wage. Their interests and your interests are diametrically opposed. They want to maximize the wealth of their shareholders, as well as maximize their profits. They want to be able to reap the maximum amount of productivity out of you at the lowest possible cost, whereas you want to be able to receive the highest amount of revenue for your time earmarked into working that dead-end, dispiriting, unfulfilling, harrowing, debilitating, brutally wretched job. And the employer will never acquiesce and never concede to paying you anything close to subsistence wage. They want to maximize their profits at no cost, and they view their employees as exploitable, expendable capital livestock who they metaphorically harvest for profiteering purposes. This is not every company, but seems to be the vast majority of them. The goal is to maximize the wealth of their shareholders, not to maximize the well-being of their employees. So you can never depend on an employer to bail you out, and it's incredibly arduous to be able to pull yourself out of the muck and mire when you're working a dead-end, debilitating job and you're moonlighting as an entrepreneur, because these dead-end jobs are highly time-consuming. They pay a non-subsistence wage, and they render you exhausted at the end of the day. So you're frazzled, you're torpid, you're fatigued, you're impaired, you're vitiated, and you want to be able to be pursuant of entrepreneurial pursuits. But when you're lethargic, when you're jaded, when you're worn out, when you are ravaged, it's all the more arduous to strategically work hard and to put forth the effort into cultivating lucrative brands and integrating income-generating assets. Real briefly, what also precipitates wage slavery is the presence of over 13,000 evisceration fees that people who work real private sector jobs based on voluntary demand pay into against their own volition and receive absolutely nothing in return for paying into. There's no universal basic income, in spite of the fact that people who work real private sector jobs based on voluntary demand pay into these 13,000 plus evisceration fees. And that further undermines your wealth. It further sets you back, and at the cost of your time, wealth, happiness, and dignity. You wind up not only accruing debt, but you're subsidizing the amenities, pensions, benefits, and lofty salaries of glorified public welfare aristocrats who do not work real private sector jobs and who would not have their positions if we lived in a free market economy in which all jobs were based on voluntary transactions. Glorified public welfare aristocrats have positions that are not based on voluntary demand. All jobs should be based on voluntary demand. As an entrepreneur, you only succeed if customers consume your brand content or procure your brand products. It's a real private sector job based on voluntary demand. You only can sustain the position if customers demand your services. Because these glorified public welfare aristocrats, their positions exist because against our own volition, we have to subsidize their amenities, pensions, benefits, lofty salaries, even though there's no voluntary demand for their positions. So it would behoove you to do everything in your purview to escape living a life fraught with wage slavery. Thanks for